Guys, welcome back to the night session of our service. And so tonight we're going to start it off down in Cartersville, Georgia. Gabe,
Mm,
one of our favorite parts of the world,
that's
Georgia,
like 30
Tennessee
minutes
area.
away from my
I
hometown.
know. Now, here's an interesting thing. This is Frank Bennett. He is with Lake Point Church in Cartersville, Georgia, and they are a church plant that is based right next to a sports facility. Now, if you know anything about college football, you know that Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback for the Clemson Tigers. He won a national championship as a freshman, and Frank Bennett is actually neighbors with his family and really good friends with Trevor Lawrence's family. And so it's really cool that that's kind of a fun fact, but they really enjoy sports. I mean, this is how their ministry kind of
Yep.
started. They're LSU grads, and they planted this church down in Cartersville. Now, the other interesting thing is that FBC Cartersville is the home of Lottie Moon, where Frank came from. So, Frank has an interesting testimony. It's an awesome story, and we're going to kick it to Chase and Logan as they interview Frank Bennett.
Hey everyone, welcome to our interview. My name is Chase Durham and I'm joined by Logan Andrew, and our special guest today is Frank Bennett with Lake Point Church in Cartersville, Georgia. For those of you that don't know, Cartersville is located just north of Atlanta near the Alabama state line. And also, I just learned a fun fact that Lottie Moon is actually from Cartersville First Baptist. And so if you don't know who she is, she's just one of the most world-renowned missionaries. Go ahead and Google her and learn about that. But Frank, thank you so much for joining us. As I was preparing to meet you, I was looking around your church website and reading your bio, and I'm just overwhelmed with just how the Lord has led you. It's been so cool just to see the Lord's faithfulness in your life. And so why don't we go ahead and start our interview just by you sharing a little bit about you and your wife, Suzanne, and what led you guys to church plant in Georgia.
Well, I appreciate it so much, Jason and Logan, for having me on. It's such an honor and love what you guys are doing. I love the fact that you're focusing on missions with the students. That is huge. Suzanne and I have been at this for about 8 years, church planting, and got the call to plant while I was serving on staff at First Baptist Cartersville, which is a home of Lottie Moon. She actually left First Baptist Cartersville and went straight over to China. And so we got the call just through some books, and obviously, reading, some areas in what the Bible was saying, and talking to us. And really, it began with this question. I began to ask the Lord, Lord, where can I make the most impact for your kingdom? Where, I was serving in a great church, and I was a music minister. We had 3 kids, and life was just great. It was awesome, and wasn't looking for any interruptions. But I just said, Lord, where can I make the most impact? And then through that prayer, he led me on a journey and led my wife on a journey. And unbeknownst to me, my wife was asking a similar question alongside more of family. And so at the same time that the seed of church planting was put in my heart, the seed of adoption was planted in my wife's heart. And so those kind of collided, converged, however you want to see it. And then we planted Lake Point Church, and actually Cartersville First Baptist sent us out to plant Lake Point Church, literally 13, actually less than that, about 10 miles away from the campus. And we partnered with Lake Point Sporting Complex, which is the world's really most renowned travel sports destination. And so the best of the best come here, whether it be basketball or baseball, even football. And so they come here first, and they get trained, and then they go to college. And so anyway, it's been awesome. So we partner with the guys at Lake Point Sports to have a church there for people who are out of town, because it's easy for travel sports to be a god, and not that all travel families treat it that way. In fact, many times, many people want to go to church. It's just not easy. And when you're out of town a lot, it's hard to just kind of get out of going to church. And so they wanted to provide a church for out of town guests. And then we've done lots of sports camps free for the community, and then we've done tons of chapels in the indoor facilities and in on the baseball fields. Obviously, we're not doing much of that right now. We're just now trying to gear up for that, but such a great partnership with the guys over at Lake Point Sports, and that's why we call ourselves Lake Point Church.
Wow. Man, what a cool ministry. What a cool opportunity presented by where you are geographically. That's really, really cool. So you said that you and your wife had this calling to plant a church before you really even knew where that church would be. So can you maybe share more about that? How you ended up, 10 miles from your home church, or did you guys think that you might go overseas? Like how did that kind of go about?
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, in this process, we we did kind of go overseas, through our adoption, which I know adoption and church planting are different, but in our story, in the story that God was writing, it was all one and the same story. We did go overseas and doubled our family, adopted 3 siblings, and at the same time, we stayed close to home. We were praying about where we needed to plant a church. We were looking at outside of New Orleans. My wife and I graduated from LSU, and her family's still in Baton Rouge, and so we have lots of contacts there. And after Katrina, which I brought some some student choirs over my years of ministry to New Orleans, and so we've had a lot of contacts. So one of the areas we were looking at was outside of New Orleans, and then I met this gentleman who had the vision of Lake Point Sports. He's a believer, and I had a friend of mine who was a senator who said, "Hey, you need to go and just meet this guy. I just feel like you need to meet him." And so I did, and heard his vision, and he and I just hit it off really well. And he was telling me about this vision, but he says, I want this to be different. I don't want this to be just about the physical aspect of the athlete, because there's so much more than the physical part. It's also the spiritual part. We want to develop the spiritual part of the athlete. And he goes, we want to change the game, and we want to put a church out there. And he looked at me, he says, well, you're a minister here in Cartersville. Why don't you put a church out there? And I was like, what? And he was like, well, yeah. And I was like, well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because God has put in our heart to plant a church, but not around here. And of course, this is before we officially adopted, and God knew that there was absolutely no way we could double our family and move and relocate. We're still in the same house, in the same community and stuff. And so I was like, well, let's pray about this. And so I introduced him to our director of missions here in Bartow County. And then, of course, our pastor at the time at First Baptist Cartersville, I told him about God's call, and he was very in favor of that. And so he walked us through. So us planting a church in New Orleans or St. Louis or even back in Texas is different than just a few miles down the street. And so that just needed more prayer and everything. So yeah, it was really interesting. It's kind of like Henry Blackaby's study, Experiencing God, which students, if you have never done that study, you need to do that study. It will bring. You could do it as a group, or you could do it personally. But in that book, in that study, he talks about how you always need to observe and watch to see how God is working around you because he is. Now, you might be too busy looking at these to observe that, but always look to see where God is working and join him in that work. That conversation with the guy at Lake Point Sports, it was an invitation for me to join what God was doing.
Gosh, that's Frank, that's so encouraging on so many levels. I think what you just said about like God is always at work and we just need to look how we can join him. I mean, that's been a huge theme with missions that we've been talking about. Logan and I just took a trip to the Dominican Republic with students. And, you know, every time we take these mission trips or have the church camps, it's the best week of these kids' lives, right?
Mhm.
And everyone's always like, why can't that happen at home? Well, at home, we're distracted. At home, we have cell service. At home, we aren't looking for what God is doing. But when you're on the mission trip, you have this mission mindset where you're looking for opportunities to partner with what God's already doing. So that's such a great word. And then also, I'm really fascinated. I didn't realize the influence of sports that you kind of have in your ministry. Are you like a sports guy? Did you play sports growing up or anything like
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I did in high school, but obviously not in college. But yeah, love sports, and obviously, and we, of course, I mentioned earlier we graduated from LSU, so we love the Tigers and love the SEC, and of course, I was born and raised in Texas, and but moving over here to Georgia in the Southeast Conference, it's like football is a whole nother, I mean, it's like a religion. It's just great. Like you schedule your church events around SEC football. It's crazy. But yeah, we love sports, and we've got lots of, it's a lot of great things coming around. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, quarterback at Clemson, the Lawrence is our friend of mine. He lived one street over from us. We see him at the pool and love the family, and it's like it's in our blood, it's in our culture. Sports is just crazy over here, and not that it's not in Texas, of course, but it's just, I don't know, it's just so compact together, it's just everywhere. So yeah, and Lake Point Sports is really an incredible and amazing place.
That's awesome. So I want to kind of go off script, ask you a question here.
Mhm.
So our culture too is all about sports.
Mhm.
Well, not everyone plays sports, but this whole idea of like travel baseball or travel sports and soccer, and how families have this genuine wrestle of, do I put my kid in travel sport because that means I'm not going to see my church family for like a year?
Mhm.
Uh, what kind of like advice would you give to them, how they can kind of, I don't know, reconcile that tension, or like what should families do if they have kids traveling and playing sports all the time?
Yeah, no, and it's definitely something you want to wrestle with. First of all, I do want to say the church for the longest time, the Big C Church for the longest time, have really treated travel sports like the enemy,
Yeah.
which, you know, that's kind of a natural response. But we have treated, and I think the church as a whole has done a better job over the years. But we actually embraced that. Now for the family, the travel sports family, because we have our oldest daughter. She's 22 now. She played soccer in college, and she played travel soccer, and so we kind of had a little bit. There were some Sundays where obviously I couldn't go because I was preaching, but my wife would go and go with her to some of the games, and there was a little bit of conflict within that. But one thing we have realized that, and I've told other people, is look, you can't live your life compartmentalizing God. We have got to understand that God needs to live in the moment of our lives, of every day of our lives. And which, now that doesn't mean that we should not be going to church, because obviously we need that fellowship. We need the fellowship of the Sunday mornings, students, the Wednesday nights. I mean, growing up, my friends in high school, they helped disciple me more than the student pastor, more than anything. Just hanging around them because we did life together. And if I did not go to my student youth groups on Wednesday nights or even hang out on Sunday nights, back when we had Sunday night services, I would be a totally different person. They introduced me to Christian music that discipled me, and it just changed my life. But we cannot compartmentalize God. So if you are a travel sports family, and if you feel like legit, my son, my daughter has a chance to play college ball, that's great. But you got to bring your relationship into where you're at. You've got to, if you're having to be gone on a Sunday, find a home church. You know, do Bible study together with your team, with your family, and that is so important to do that. So you can't say, well, God lives, I need to worship God on Sunday mornings with my church family, and that's it. No. If that's your mindset, you will not grow as a disciple of Jesus Christ. You will not grow in your faith.
That's good. And students, I really hope that you paid attention to that, because he's exactly right. Like, we cannot just compartmentalize our faith to being at church on Sunday mornings. Like, our faith should infiltrate everything that we do. And so thanks for sharing that, Frank. You also mentioned when you were just sharing about the just how your friends discipled you, and it seems like you had like a really solid community around you. But also when I was reading on your bio, and this is kind of getting back to church planning, you had mentioned that you had formed this advisory team to help you kind of discern your prayers and discern your calling. Could you just share, like, why did you think to form an advisory team, and also who were those men? Could you just share that with our church?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we first of all, I'd never been a pastor before, and I had some big questions. Um, Obviously, I did some training. I went through the North American Mission Board. Went through some church planting training through a church around here, which is Westridge Church, and they ended up having a great partnership with NAM. But before all that began, I needed some men who could pray with me and advise me in this. And the first guy on the list is my pastor at First Baptist, Randall Williams, who's not there anymore. And I wanted to make sure that he was very transparent. I was transparent to where what was going on, and I wanted him involved in the process in the whole time. And the other one was our DOM, our Director of Missions, David Franklin. And so he was an important part of that. And then another one was Ike Reichert, who was at Piedmont Church and pastor here in the Georgia area, Atlanta, Georgia area. Another guy was Bobby Martin. Bobby Martin. I was actually on staff years ago with Bobby. Bobby was the worship pastor at Spring Baptist Church, which ironically is where John Mark grew up, Pastor John Mark. And so Bobby had done the same thing. He was a worship pastor and had started a church not too far away from the church we were serving in. And he transitioned to a new pastor and was like, man, that's what I'm about to do. So Bobby really provided a lot of that. And then Mark Lunsford, he was on, I met him there. He was on staff there at Hope Fellowship in Frisco. And then Danny Crocker, a good friend of mine, on when I served on staff at Grace View Baptist in Tomball, Texas, around the Houston area. And so these are men that I could trust, and that people I know they would pray, and they had and people who had planted a church before, and everything. So it was hugely important, and they were really there during the pre-training years and during the transition, just to solidify my calling. They asked me tough questions, and it was important for me to have those.
Yeah. Well, something that we try and encourage our students in our church family as a whole is the necessity of community, that it is not something that's optional as a believer.
Mhm.
We need people, and we need the church. We need accountability to help us to walk above reproach, to encourage us. And definitely as a pastor, right, it's so necessary to have accountability to ensure that you are walking above reproach. So, what other measures of accountability do you and your wife have in your life to keep you focused on the Lord?
Yes, oh, that's great. Accountability is huge in ministry. Ministry, especially church planting, can easily be a lonely place. Missions can easily be a lonely place, and so you really need to have that accountability of just a fellowship with other people who are growing with you, and just to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Um, I have a group of elders in our church. We actually started off with elders, and we're actually moving towards adding deacons. Now, deacons are just a serving body, but elders are people, men that the church votes on and stuff. And we're an SBC, Southern Baptist Church, of course. And but these men, in fact, I just met with them Monday night, and so they asked me questions. Hey, are you taking care of yourself? Because they know that I am a hands-on kind of person, and if something is, we want to start something, then I'm involved in it, and then I release it. But sometimes if it's not going like I want it to go, sometimes I'll take it back, and so they'll ask me questions. Hey, are you letting go of some things, and because sometimes I could be a little bit controlling of making sure that things are going well. And so, and that's important, because if I don't let things go, then it affects the health of the pastor, and the health of the pastor and the health of his wife is hugely important. Another thing we do is specifically with my wife. My wife is in a small group. We're both in a small group, but she's in a ladies' small group as well. But so around our church is important, but also outside of our church. So for those students who will one day either be in missions or church planting or so, it's good to have an accountability group with people you work with, but it's also really important to have a group outside of the people you work with. That is huge, because you need to be able to sit down and say, hey, this isn't going well in my life. Or, this person, I know you don't know this person, but there's, how do I handle this person? Or, hey, things aren't going well with our family and our kids. I mean, you want to be able to say things about parenting, ask questions and prayer requests on parenting that you may not want to share with your church family or your elders. And that, so there's a church around nearby, Westridge Church, that helped us get our training, and they actually do. They have this ministry called Engage, and this ministry is for church planters and their wives, and they send us. I get a text message every Sunday from the guy that leads Engage, and I also get we also get treats for our family. So every birthday, one of our kids' birthdays, they get a treat, and that kind of stuff. And then they also do church planting retreats. So we've been to various places on trips and have been able to be around other church planters and their wives and speakers, and it's really been a great time. So we have some people that we can go to and say, look, I need to be real, and I need to be real right now, and it's important to have those groups outside as well.
And so that's good. I love hearing just the high level of transparency you have with certain people. We try and encourage our kids towards that, like in their small groups and stuff. But so obviously accountability would be a big thing that you would encourage our students to look for. But when you think back to, 6th through 12th grade Frank, or even like as you've been raising your kids, like what's that big thing that you desire students to do in order to grow in the Lord?
Yeah, well, we have 6 kids, 3 biological, 3 adopted. So Madison is our oldest. She just graduated from college and at North Greenville University in South Carolina. And then our oldest son, Landon, finished high school last year. And then we have Logan, who's upcoming junior, Lawson, who's our oldest adopted. He is upcoming sophomore, Marion, incoming freshman, and then Lincoln is an incoming 8th grader. So we've got them spanned middle school, high school, and college. So we live this life. Accountability is huge. You're not getting any accountability on social media. In fact, on social media, you're living a make-believe life. We want to try to make ourselves look as good as we possibly can. So we can't live our life totally like that, because we can almost have this sense of fakeness in our life, and we can't be real. We have to be real with people. We need people in our life to be real, and that's where community comes in. You need students, you need other friends that you can sit down with and just say, hey, here's what I'm going through. I know I just posted something totally different on here, but here's what's really happening. Because if we aren't real, then we hide that, and then it just later on in life it's gonna explode, and we've got to release some of that. Growing in faith is huge. Because of these things, we have awesome, incredible, unlike I had in high school. I mean, when I was in middle school and high school, we didn't even have the internet. We had running water, we had indoor plumbing, electricity, but no personal computers. I graduated in '88, so I mean, no internet. I mean, it's crazy. So it's it's definitely a different time. But with the devices we have now, you have the ability now more than ever, yes, to get yourself in trouble with social media, and to look at things you're not supposed to be looking at. But you also have the amazing advantage of looking up the Bible app, and not only looking up scripture, but there's tons of resources there right at your fingertips, to where you, even on the Bible app, you can look at devotionals, Right Now Media, which is right literally in your backyard. I mean, the headquarters, I think, is across the street from you guys, and so Right Now Media is an incredible way. We have Right Now Media in our church. And so there's a ton of things for students to do. Get involved in that. There's no excuse. You have more at your fingertips than my generation ever had. And just don't get distracted. Don't get distracted. Grow. You want to grow in your faith. Books. I know this generation may not read a whole lot of books. I think probably one of the best, but I mean, you guys have probably talked about lots of great books. I would say one of the best books you can get would probably be Boundaries for Teens by Dr. Henry Cloud. Boundaries, boundaries are huge, and of course Henry Cloud has lots of good boundary books, but Boundaries for Teens is a really, really good book, and it could be something that you could implement in your life. And also, just more importantly, discipleship wise, be careful of who you follow, because who you follow and what you follow will follow you. We see this in the Psalm, the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. At the end, he talks about how how uh, how basically mercy will follow you, goodness and mercy will follow you all the days of my life. And so throughout this whole psalm, he's talking about following the shepherd. And at the end of the psalm, he looks back and realizes, David, the writer, realizes, hey, something's going to be following me. So what is following me? Well, what's following you is what you follow now. So the dash that's on your tombstone, on your gravestone, between the date you were born and the date you died, that dash will be the trail, will be the story of what will follow you. And so what you follow, who you follow, will follow you. And so if you want goodness and mercy to follow you, then you need to follow goodness and mercy and follow those people who are that as well. So if anything you can get away from this call, this video, is watch who you follow. Watch who you follow, because what you follow and who you follow will follow you.
That's good. And Frank, everything you've said is so incredibly encouraging for our kids. I'm even thinking back to everything like the Henry Blackaby Experiencing God book that you recommended, the Boundaries book, the devices, like taking control of your device and not letting it take control of you, the living the real life, like you live this fake life on the digital world, but you need somewhere to be real and be transparent. Those are all just, I mean, you hit it on the head. And so students and church family, I really pray that you guys receive these words from Pastor Frank. I pray that you consider them. I pray that you pick up those Bible studies. He also mentioned Right Now Media. Our church also has Right Now Media, and we can give you, any of our church members, a free account. And so all you have to do is email us, and we will set you up. And that is basically the Netflix of Bible studies. It is absolutely incredible. And so, Frank, unfortunately, we are running out of time. I feel like we could have talked for hours.
Yeah.
So I'm super grateful for you. And then also just the fact that you used to work here at Cottonwood. And you, like several, like church, Bo Landers and his sister Bree and several others. Like Frank was a pastor here on staff when they were just students in the ministry here at Cottonwood. And so we are grateful for the legacy that you have left here at Cottonwood, and just your faithfulness and obedience to the Lord. It's just really encouraging. And so kind of as we are wrapping up, Frank, is there any way that our church family can support you guys in your church plant at Lake Point, whether that be prayer or connection or financial donations? Let us know, let them know how they can stay connected with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I love I do love the connection. You mentioned connection. I do love the connection between obviously us and Cottonwood. And I definitely remember the times of taking youth choirs to St. Louis and getting connected to inner city kids there in St. Louis and doing incredible ministry there. New York City, doing incredible ministry there as well. And just love those stories and incredible memories. Our website is a great place to start, lakepointonline.com. And you can look at how, you can support us and what we're doing, events and everything. But obviously prayer is huge. And personally, I would love if you guys could just pray for our family. My wife is actually out of town right now, just a day trip. She's visiting her sisters, but she'd love to be on this call. But Suzanne and I sometimes it's a little tough parenting and church planting and just doing life. So just praying for wisdom. We're trying to raise a bunch of teenagers in the house right now, and my wife and I have an incredible close relationship with one another, and love the Lord, follow Him, and I don't know how parents who don't love the Lord and don't love each other, I don't know how they parent, because like we are madly infatuated love with one another. And it's like, okay, how do we do this? But even with the strong bond that we have with one another and with the Lord, it's a little tough sometimes. And so just be in prayer that God will give us wisdom on parenting in this crazy world, these crazy times. Also, just be in prayer for wisdom while we continue to grow our and reach our city. We currently meet in a school, in a middle school, and have a great, strong relationship with the superintendents and the principals out here. But we did last year. We bought 20 acres of land for a future location right here in Emerson, and so we just trying to figure out how, when's the right timing of building, and obviously it takes lots of resources and that. And so, but we want to reach our community and want to reach our those people who are coming in to our town through Lake Point Sports. And in fact, one of the things we're doing on our land is we aren't personally, but except that we're donating the land, we're actually building a community park. So there are no parks at all, no playgrounds, no green space in the city of Emerson. They have to go, pretty far for families to go fly a kite, to go play on the playground. And so we want to change that because us growing up, we spent lots of time in the various parks around McKinney and Allen, and just it breaks my heart that does not exist for families. And so we're trying to build a park there, and that's going to be part of our property and stuff. And so just wisdom on that, resources for that to build that park and the right people on board. And then with our church, that they would be strong on sharing their faith. That's going to be our goal in the fall as we're moving towards just teaching our people how to share their faith, their story. And so praying for that. And if, people want to give, that, just go to our website, they can just give, to hit the give button. But yeah, prayers and contributions.
Well, Frank, I am greatly encouraged by you. Thank you so much for taking the time just to encourage our church family and our students. Students, I hope that you guys took notes and take action upon those notes and the words that Frank challenged you with. So students, thanks for joining us. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Man, that was absolutely incredible to hear. One thing that really struck me is that they have really seen the need in Cartersville. In Georgia and Cartersville, I mean, sports is one of the biggest things in that area. And they have seen that need, and they are meeting that need with the gospel. They are adjusting how they can do ministry specifically to meet that need, and that is just absolutely inspiring.
That's what ministry is all about.
Absolutely.
Meeting the need.
Absolutely.